AI is only as smart as we teach it. Now, in 10, 15 years, will it be intuitive? I don't know.
All right, and we're back. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Mark Prys, who is the co-founder and COO of Eagle Cybersecurity. Eagle is a veteran-owned cybersecurity consulting and compliance firm with a team bringing decades of not only military experience, but also three-letter agency experience. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be a friendly, relaxed chat where we talk about all the exciting things going on in cybersecurity. For those of you that it's your first time joining us, we bring on professionals from all over the cybersecurity industry from the executive suite. So that way we can learn about their backgrounds, where they came from, why they started the business, the trends that they see in the industry, along with what is on the company's plate right now and what they see in the future. So lock yourself in for a great 30 to 40-minute podcast where we're going to go over a lot of great stuff. And remember, the vibe is always the same. It's real, it's interesting, and there's no fluff. So, Mark, thank you for joining us today. Where are you calling in from?
Well, Eagle Global Cybersecurity is based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, with an office in Boise, Idaho.
Well, that's an interesting combination. How can you elaborate on that a little bit? How did you end up in those two locations?
Colorado Springs, because when I retired from the military, this was a good area, and it still is. And so this is where I settled. And my business partner decided to settle in Boise, Idaho.
Oh,
It's
very
just
cool.
a matter of where each of us decided to retire at.
And as a retiree out of all that, you're still a sweet seat running a company. So what type of retirement is that?
For me, it's a very good retirement. You know, I tell people I'm twice retired, once from the military, for my military service, where I spent 22 years, 4 months, and 17 days in the Air Force. So that was my first retirement. And then I worked as a defense contractor for the next, 20 years. And once I became eligible for Social Security, I retired again. And had started Eagle already, so that was a nice transition to keep me busy because retirement's no fun. After you've worked all your life, retirement is actually not the enjoyable, hey, I'm going to go sit and fish all day, type in. Nah, it's not fun at all. So having another company or having a company then allows me to keep busy, keep out of my wife's hair, and bring in income.
Well, everybody appreciates that. And most importantly, thank you for your service of what you've done to
Well,
our country. When it comes to starting Eagle, you said you had already started Eagle Cybersecurity. So walk me through what the driving factor was that made you want to start that business.
the I knew I was going to retire. And so I sought out a coworker of mine that we had done many projects together, and we both were about ready to retire. And we decided to get together and put together this company so that when we did transition, that we had another revenue stream. Plus the fact that we still both wanted to contribute, to the mission that what Eagle does, which is to provide uh, cyber risk management for small to mid-size entities, focusing on cyber hygiene, governance documents. Currently, we do pen testing. We finished up a pen test for a municipality in Southern California. We have a long-going contract with a financial firm in the East Coast to do pen testing for their customers, and we're hoping to expand into user training, and again, cyber hygiene, making sure that people can understand and afford, cybersecurity in their daily lives.
So let's break that down a little bit. Starting with just you as the co-founder and COO, what does your day look like on a day-to-day basis?
Right now, it's fulfilling my contractual obligations. Currently, right now, where I'm running two phishing campaigns for two companies on the East Coast. And so, therefore, I will spend tomorrow looking at the results of those phishing campaigns and creating reports for their company management to review. If someone, and the phishing campaigns are primarily, getting emails and trying to get you to click on something. Okay. In real, like in real life. I mean, we get those emails all the time. I know I do. And trying to trick you into, clicking on something. And that's the biggest thing is to train people that how to read emails properly, how to determine whether or not that email is legit or not, which is hard. And then how do you get around that, So that takes up the majority of our time if we're not on the road to go do a pen test somewhere.
Okay. So when you say go on the road to do a pen test, does that mean you're doing like human hacking and you're trying to get into the building, or walk me through what that looks like?
D, all the above.
All the above.
We
Okay.
the majority of the pen tests can be done remotely. I can sit in my home office here and try to access a site anywhere in the world. You know that. Um, we do go on site, one to interview employees, um, to check physical security. You don't realize how many times the doors are propped open, after they've installed, biometrics or some type of scanner, to ensure compliance for physical security, but then they turn around and, prop the door open because it's hot or something of that nature. So we're on site to do that, to see if we can walk into buildings, see if employees leave their laptops logged in, things of that nature. Where can we get into? And you'd be surprised, how many times, in being overly friendly, you can get in and do things. So that's the first phase of it, the physical security aspect of it. And then it's to talk to employees to see where employees will tell a contractor like myself stuff that they either are not going to tell their management or they've told their management and the management has not necessarily taken them serious. So by bringing in a third party, Eagle Global, that it can help the employees, see that their concerns are met. And then after that, we go back to our home office and we try to break in, through the internet using the standard, penetration tools. And then,
So, oh,
yes,
sorry to cut you off, but just as an example for that, when you talk about people leaving their computers unlocked or just being overly social, what would you say are like the top two mistakes that companies are doing on site?
the top two that I believe is one, not training the employees. Training is the first thing that gets cut when there's a tight budget, and employees are just expected to know things.
Got
And
it.
that would be number one, and that would probably be the most important. The other one is just thinking that their area is secure, that no one like me is going to be able to get in and, see their computers and, log in or not log in, but to use their login and send emails. Okay. The favorite thing is to find a computer that is logged in and then email everybody on their list and tell them that, there's going to be free donuts tomorrow, and see the reaction, you know. Again, ours is not to in is to educate. We're not nefarious that okay, I'm going to get in and email the mayor of a city, using Billy Bob's email address and get him in trouble. That's not not my effort here. My effort is to find weaknesses, show that they can be exploited, but then to teach the employees and management how to overcome them. You know,
So do you make that employee bring in donuts when it
no, I
as
don't
part of your
really
contract?
care. I
No.
usually by that point I'm back at my home office. I don't. I just go there to cause a little mischief and then leave. Uh, but then we do. produce a report, and we are, out briefing the municipality's management to these items. Hey, I can walk into your maintenance yard. Nobody challenged me. I asked an employee about a uh, maintenance program and I make up a story. I heard that the maintenance program is very cumbersome. It's very clunky. Can you show me? You know, and again, overly friendly employees. I can't, you know, stress that. I mean, it's one to have good employees, and I've never really encountered a bad one, really. But they're overly friendly, and my military background says, trust but verify. So if I walk into your maintenance yard and I say, hey, I'm, the Mark, I represent the manufacturer of the software you're using, and we'd like to talk about it. Well, the employee should say, okay, just a minute, call his manager, verify that I am who I say I am, be vigilant, you know, and then be friendly. Oh, most definitely, but be vigilant, you know. So, and that's hard because people want to help, especially if the software isn't performing like it should. They'd be really quick to, talk about it.
It sounds like you're the Michael West in the burn notice when you go into these places.
Yep. You know,
So,
it,
oh, sorry. I was just
no,
going to
no,
say,
no. It's real easy to go once you're on site, to go to, you know, a FedEx office or whatever and get a badge printed up. I've, print up hokey pokey badges to say I'm, so and so. And again, people want to help. Generally, they want to help. They're overly friendly. And again, there's nothing wrong in that. It's just to be vigilant and all. And so that's what we try to do.
well, and something you kind of hinted at before that I'd like you to dig into a little bit more is, you being a veteran, you are able to bring a different approach to cybersecurity and getting in. So how is Eagle's approach different than just another cybersecurity company?
Well, like I said, we try to hit the ground running. It is not uncommon for us to walk around after normal hours. We don't just come in 9 to 5. I will walk around or try to walk around their maintenance yard or whatever, because physical security is everything. You try to get in your maintenance yard at 10 o'clock at night, you know, where, and then check. And it's not only just can I get in, but are the vehicles secure? Cyber is more than just cyber. Let's back up a little bit. Can we back up a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay. Cyber is not an IT initiative. Cyber is protecting intellectual property for a company, for a city, for anything. It is the protection of their assets, whether their assets are a vehicle or a forklift or access to their data. It all, Eagle treats it all as one. So if I can get in and to the maintenance yard and find a forklift that has the keys in it, what's keeping me from just driving off with a, $15,000, forklift? So there's that aspect of it. And then the aspect of whether or not laptops are logged off or not. That's a simple um, action by their system administrators. If no action on the keyboard in 5 minutes, log them off. You know, but employees don't really like that because if they're in the middle of something, they may not be active on it for 5 minutes and they turn around and they get logged off, or whatever. So, but anyways, it's protecting of assets. And Eagle, looks at assets as something of value to the municipality, something of value to the customer, to the company. Okay. Not just, are your passwords being, have an expiration date of 3 months. Cyber's more than that. It's actually a risk to the company, risk to the city, risk to the customer. That's where cyber is. The reason why IT people are in cyber is because, one, we understand it more so than a mechanic or more so than an admin, administrative assistant or somebody, or even the mayor or, director or manager. So that's why IT people, are in it. However, I still maintain that cyber protects the assets of the entity. And that's the
And
only reason it's there.
and I think that's a great slant on it because when people hear cyber, they assume information technology, emails, going to corrupt websites. So the fact that you're bringing in a physical aspect of that to where it's an entire asset, I think is a very cool approach.
Your your point though is correct. Most people think of cyber as, oh, he's going to tell me I have to have mile long passwords, and that might be true, but it's more than just that. We walked into one municipality in Southern California during a monthly council meeting where there was, not hundreds, but the building that would have been locked up at 5 o'clock is open because it was an open meeting. And so we were like roaming around, seeing, where we could, get in without being challenged. One of my associates, went upstairs, second floor to the mayor's office, trying to see how far he could get in. So it's more than just controls on a computer. It's much, much more. Um, the thing is, like, in part of my career, I ran a data center, okay, for the Missile Defense Agency. That was the largest data center that they had, which was a 22,000 square foot data center with 500 IT racks. Okay. If you physical security says that if you get into that data center with a CD or some type of USB, pop it into the server, restart the server. Guess what? Now you own the server. So
Wow.
physical security says that if I prevent you from getting in, I've made my data secure or more secure than what it was before. Okay. A lot of times, even on your home computer, you pop in most of them don't have CDs now. I'm showing my age. That's a lot of more, but if you pop in a USB drive, you know, you got a 50-50 chance you reboot it that it's going to read off that USB port before it
Right.
reads anything else. And so you know, there's lots of ways to break in. And so, and you try to find the most common ones because again, it's a balance. You have to secure, but you can't make it so secure that you can't get anything done.
And I actually think that's a great example because I've suffered through that myself. So, for those of you that ever are working on a computer with a USB drive attached or plugged in, if it is not restarting, it's because even if that USB drive is fine, the computer is attempting to launch from that USB drive and there's no actual installation of Windows that it can pull from. So, if you're ever hitting weird errors on just restarting,
Yeah.
make sure you unplug all those things so that way it can restart based on the actual computer itself.
And the reason, um, and this is not any state secret, is that most people, and that's a broad paintbrush, I understand, will not bother to look at the BIOS configuration once they get things running. It's like it's working. So why do I need to care? And why do I need to look? Which means that when you get a laptop and you turn it on, whoever the last technician was that configured it, and that's what it is. I had that problem in a data center. When you were looking at server farms, that run virtually, and you have a whole stack of them, 16 virtual farms running, off of a platform, and it's got three power supplies. And then you ask the system administrator, well, how are the power supplies configured? He'll tell you whatever the field tech set them at, that's where they're at. It may not be the correct ones. I had that problem. So, you need to do a little bit more. And I can't fault them much. I really can't. How many times have you used a microwave without even thinking about it? You just assume that everything's going to work. It's going to pop your popcorn. That's all you care about, you know. So that's, a bad analogy. It's not one of my better ones, but it's like that. My wife of many, many years, love of my life, does not understand how a microwave works. But she fixes great meals with it, and popcorn and everything else. If I ask her, how come it gets hot on the side? How come it's blowing out so much hot air? She wouldn't be able to tell you. It's the same thing with computers. As long as they run, they don't care. And
Yep.
that's where we come in the education side. And Eagle Global is trying to educate people and getting them to understand, not all the way, but understand, the fundamentals and why, you know.
Yeah, and I actually see that as a very common issue. Really, and it's almost like it's human nature because if it is working, people don't care. Or if a company is making money, they're not worried about all the things. They start paying attention to it when the pain point is actually there. So when you're looking at industry trends from your point of view, specifically for small and middle-sized companies, what are you watching right now as the trends to be careful of and to be aware of?
You hit it there. The small and medium-sized companies, the mom and pops, I call them, the two-person lawyer office, okay, the 3 or 4 person dentist, dental office. They just want to work. They want to work. They pay somebody, an office manager to make sure everything works okay. And really that's what they're concerned about. Now, they are aware of patient client or, the client confidentiality and all. But when you ask them how do they really do that, they defer to somebody else. And so that's where we try to come in, one, to educate just a little bit. We're not trying to grant them PhD level understanding of encryption, but we want them to understand that encryption is important. And this is how you do this. We start by, on employees, is teaching them about passphrases, and that passwords are, from an entry level person, passwords are terrible. You know, the industry expects you, they preach a lot. They preach that, oh, you should have different passwords for everything and don't write them down. And they got to, well, you can teach them how to use passphrases that they are going to remember easily because they make them up themselves. And it gives them a stronger confidence in themselves and in what they're doing.
And
So,
so when you're educating, let's just call it non-technical, right? Like doctors, they're
correct,
technical, but they're experts in the medical field. They're not worried about the
correct.
technology. So how do you bridge that gap in between their profession and making sure that they're secure?
It If you're talking to the owners, you can talk about, the intellectual property and what's important to them. We have to start on a ground basis that, one, not everything is worthy of protection. That's a mistake that a lot of cyber companies and our profession teach us, that, oh, we got to protect everything. No, we don't. Okay. Certain things are not important to the continuance of a business. And so therefore you have to understand that not all data is the same. When we protect all data as the same, then we spend we spend a lot of money, you know, trying to protect everything rather than first going into a business and identifying what's important and then identifying what's not. And then you protect what's important to you. We do this in our own lives, in our own house. We identify what's important to us and what is not. And so therefore, I mean, I may leave my shed unlocked. Well, there's nothing in my shed that's important to me. You know, it has a little value, but it's just not important. Camping gear, I can get more camping gear, you know, relatively easy. Okay. Uh, but I protect my house, because of my 5 TVs, that are $1,000 a piece, in 5 different rooms and all. So I'm going to protect that more. Okay. I'm going to have
Right.
locks on the windows. I'm going to have locks on the doors. I'm going to teach my dogs, to chew on people, things of that nature. So you have to at first identify what's important. For a doctor, yes, it's, patient information as HIPAA applies. Okay. And a HIPAA applies to people that receive, your patient records. HIPAA doesn't apply to everybody. That's a misnomer. You see it in movies, and the short little videos you see on the social media. You can't come in here because of HIPAA. No, HIPAA doesn't apply to that. It applies to people that are responsible for records. So one, you have to understand, the laws and the value of the information, and then protect it as such, and then identify what's not important. Okay.
Okay.
And then go from there. So one is education. It's always education. It comes whether it's the secretary or the CEO is education. I truly wish that when I teach a class that I could get the CEO of the company very first thing stand up there and say, "Listen, I will never ever send you an email on a Friday afternoon asking you to buy me gift cards." you know, have the CEO, say, "I want you to question everything. You get an email from any manager, call them. Make sure that the email, especially if you're not expecting it, you know, and a lot of problems would be solved. It really would. Education, communication.
So it sounds like the embodiment of security really starts at the C-suite.
It should. It most definitely should start at the C-suite. Yes.
Okay. And
And
so, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we mentioned, HIPAA, there's OSHA, ITAR, CMMC, NIST, and ISO. All of
Yep.
these organizations or regulatory organizations are really beginning to crack down and are constantly evolving. So what impact are you seeing as those standards get updated that are immediately needing to be applied to clients and medium and small businesses?
The ISO probably, like you pointed out, there's a lot of standards, and it's what do you fall under? If you take credit card payments, the PCI, and other aspects of any one business, has their own standards. Um, and they are ever evolving because as soon as they think they got something locked down, someone finds a way to pick the lock. That's, human nature, Uh, my father used to tell me that a lock just keeps an honest man honest and discourages a thief. Doesn't prevent anything. It just, if you got it locked down, then a thief or what we call a bad actor, that's another phrase that they use, will find somebody else that isn't as secure as you are. So
Yeah. And for bad people, it's not to prevent them, it's really just to slow them down if you're lucky.
just yeah, to discourage a thief. That's all any of this is. But the trends, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them come from the DoD. Okay. Uh, Couple that come to my mind is two of the biggest ones. Zero Trust Framework, which came from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, which the one of the tenets is to believe that your network is already infected, is to assume that it's already infected. You just don't know it. So you build your network, a framework of the house, okay, to prevent um, what they call the access left and right. You build it such that they can't do any damage except for the small little place where they are.
So
Microsegmentation and things of that nature. We're getting deeper into cyber instead of up at the surface level, because zero trust really requires you to examine your entire network, your entire infrastructure, and microsegmentation is a vast part of that. Okay, where if you work in finance, then you are only authorized the area where the finance documents are and no other place. You can't get to the ops side. You can't get to the inventory side. You can't get to the contracts. You only get access to what you need to do your job.
And how do you sell that idea to smaller companies that are used to wearing multiple hats? Because they probably approach it as like, well, if I get this access cut down, then it's going to take me longer to do X.
It is. And you are absolutely correct. A lot of people didn't realize that when NIST released their document or their guidance, okay, that it wasn't for the, I'm going to say the little guy. It was actually for management, and it identified to management that they need to step up. And you are right, for the doctor, the lawyer, the dentist that also is, responsible for some of their IT, it's not a burden, but it's an eye opener that, yeah, you need to be aware of this. You just can't get a laptop, open it up, power it up, and start your business. You got to think about it,
So
especially if you want to secure your, again, one, intellectual property, and two, the data that is required to be secured by law.
are there any emerging technologies or methodologies that you've implemented with clients recently that is becoming particularly engaging or getting well adopted?
Um, there's some that are coming down depending on your business. Okay. Zero trust is a framework that can be applied anywhere, and it should be. Okay. And it is, again, it's thrown on the back of IT guys and cyber guys when it is purely a system engineering philosophy to how you build your network. So that's one. Zero trust is there. The other one, if you're in the DoD market, if you're a defense contractor, is CMMC, which is again, it's more of a framework that says that although you may have unclassified data due to this contract you have with the federal government, you need to protect the unclassified data to a degree. And to do that, you have to examine your infrastructure, you know. So, and then with CMMC, uh, it's not as easy as saying, "Hey, implement this," because there was rule changes to the FAR and the DFAR, the Federal Acquisition, structure or statutes. I think that's how it is. FAR regulations, Federal Acquisition Regulations, FAR, and then the DFAR, the defense version of that, which really states that as a contractor to the government, there are certain things that you have to have done in your network to keep uh, even unclassified data secure. Too much of our intellectual property or unclassified data or gets pilfered. And a example, okay, even a lawn care company that's going to give a bid to a military base to mow all their yards, all the land. Well, they need to know the size. So what does the military do? They send them a base map that shows all the buildings on the base, the size, so they can figure out how much square footage they have to mow and all that. But why do they need to know, where the buildings are and what's in the buildings? So that becomes again, you have to examine your data, determine what's important and what is not.
So let's look at the current state of Eagle Global. So, with all that background, what would you say is working really well at Eagle Global right now?
Right now, our ability to go do education, uh, to examine the governance documents to make sure that they are in compliance with whatever federal, regulations or laws that they are working under. Uh, um, Performing pen testing and coming up with uh, accurate, honest evaluations of their networks.
Okay. And when you talk about governance, I think a lot of people tend to shy away from it because they're thinking of a massive, like 60-page document that maybe has a disaster recovery plan or something else in there that they
You
really
are
just don't want to read. And they're probably just going to throw it into a public AI and all that's about to become public information to be scraped anyway. So my question for you is, how do you build those type of documents to where not only the C-suite, but employees in the company will actually want to use it and reference it?
That's a challenge. It's not always fascinating reading. You mentioned business continuity incident response, BCIR. Uh, the only way you can get employees excited about that is tabletop exercises where they're in a room for a couple days getting paid to walk through an incident as if it really happened. Again, training, and what gets cut first? Training. The other documents are more interesting to the C-suite than the wrench turner, but it's to make them policies and procedures tend to be very verbose, and rather than just cut down to what is actually required. That's what's really good about Ego Global is the fact that we can condense down just to what they need. Okay. Like any task, it's got to be, measurable, observable, have a definite beginning and an end. You keep those principles in mind when you're drafting a document. Okay. I don't need to, through a governance document, I don't need to train my people. I need to lay out the expectations. Training is a different area. But in other words, if I have a requirement for a password change every 3 months, with password lengths being 16 plus characters, upper and lower case, I just need to explain that what the requirement is and how to achieve it. I don't need to go into a lot of background. Most of them don't want that. Tell me what I need to do to get my job done. But
Right.
then I have to have training to help deepen that understanding. So it
Got
goes
it.
hand in hand. That's what the governance side. I'll streamline your documents, but then I also have to train your employees to understand the streamlined documents.
And do you have a unique approach to that training that makes it more receptive?
Um, I had the only unique part of it is the fact that I assume nobody understands it. When you come into a classroom or even a virtual, it is assuming that they know absolutely nothing. I use my wife as an example. She is a fantastic person when it comes to children. Oh my gosh, she loves, little toddlers, 2 year olds. She understands them more than I ever could. When it comes to IT, I use her as an example because if I bring it to her and she, you know, after we're done, she doesn't increase her understanding, then I got to change the way I do something. Plus, I teach her so I don't piss her off. Uh, you know how that is. So the goal of training is to increase their knowledge. That's the whole purpose of it. Because if you understand the why, why is this important? That's one of the things we key on is, to me, the most important word in the English is why, because it lends to understanding. I can teach anybody, move the chair left to right, and they're going to move the chair left to right. They're not going to understand why it's necessary. And if I can't explain why it's necessary, then you don't need to do it. Why do you wash your hands after you use the restroom? There's a reason. Once they understand the reason, then it becomes automatic to them. If I explain why you don't click on things, in emails, then it increases awareness and helps them to understand, and that depth of knowledge increases, and they're more skeptical.
Gotcha. Yeah. Connecting them to not only the reason, but the why, like you're talking about, is what creates the connection that makes
Yes,
them want to act correctly for whatever the initiative, even
whatever it
just
is.
project itself.
Even when I go and mentor to high school students and elementary students, I tell them the most important question, the most important word in the English language is why, because it lends to increase of knowledge.
So let's switch over to the other side. That's all the stuff that's working really well. So with Eagle, what are the metrics that you're most focused on improving, or what are the goals that you're trying to overcome right now?
With any small business, it's what we call hunting our own food. Getting the word out there that, one, this is a service I can provide you. Okay. Chasing those contracts. Okay. Uh, especially outside of the region where you're in. Okay. In other words, I had to network to get to a municipality in Southern California. I had to network with others to get to a company in Pennsylvania. Uh, you do that through networking with others, which is to me the best way. I wish there was like a clearinghouse and in some places they are clearinghouses where you can go to a website and see where people, want a service. Okay. Uh, and it's hunting your own food. That's to me right now the biggest pain point in owning my own business is the fact that I'm not large enough. I'm a very, very small company. And so therefore I don't have a division or a work group that's all they do is scour the web, for contract opportunities and go for them. So I have to hunt my own food. So that's to me the biggest drawback, is trying to find those websites, or that you craft your own website so that people go to it. The whole thing. How do you get your when you look for pen testing companies? How do I get Eagle to pop up on the top of Google search? It's promoting my own company. This is one way, and I thank you for this opportunity. Just to put Eagle out there. Uh, but for any small business, I don't care what you're doing. Any small business, is how do you bring in new customers?
Gotcha. So, for other small cybersecurity companies, because there's even people I have interviewed already that are in very similar situations, you talked about the networking. So, can you give some tips and tricks to those that are either trying to start their own business or are even just trying to get into the cybersecurity world? What are the best ways to network?
Reach out to the small business development in your community. Number one, uh, search out. I'm going to say a member of here in Colorado Springs. We have a social organization that meets. It's called Cyber First Friday. If you guys ever come to Colorado Springs, First Friday of every month, the bunch of cyber geeks get together and listen to presentations and network with each other. It has evolved to where it has its own website now. You can look it up, Cyber First Friday. But it's a way to network with others. Networking is not a one and done. Networking is every month showing up, every month, talking to your peers, seeing where there's a need, maybe where you can team up with somebody to accomplish or to win a contract. So, but small business development centers are awesome. There's websites out there. I know Colorado has one where a lot of companies can uh, post their needs that we can go and review. That's, Colorado is very business friendly. So, especially the Colorado Springs area, we have 5 military bases and every defense contractor known to man here. And so, therefore, there's a lot of, if you're going for the DOD, the military or the government side of things, then there's a lot of opportunities. And on the same side, Colorado Springs is large enough that on the commercial side, that there's opportunities also.
That's great. I learned something new. I did not realize there was that much military in Colorado Springs. So that's a good plug even for them. That's a place to
We
move to
have
almost.
an Army post, Fort Carson, which probably has 25,000 Army troops. Uh, the Space Force has taken over. So we got Schriever out on the plains, that does their mission. Peterson Space Force Base, which is headquarters, Air Force Academy, which trains new, Air Force officers, and Cheyenne Mountain, which is a NORAD site that's buried inside of a mountain. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I used to work there. Quarter of a mile in to a granite mountain. Uh, so, anyways, a lot of military, a lot of opportunities. Not only the government side, but also on the civilian side too. Colorado Springs is up, I don't know, 400, El Paso County, which is where we are, 450,000, you know, it's only Denver's only bigger by just a little bit. And we're going to surpass them within a year. So, but it's a very business friendly environment, for large or small businesses.
Gotcha. So let's turn our focus to the future, something that we haven't even spoken about yet, but tends to come up as the hot buzzword, right? Everybody is talking about artificial intelligence or AI or even machine learning. They're breaking it down to different subcategories. So where do you see AI in the next 6 to 12 months? How is it going to affect the cybersecurity world?
AI could assist. Okay. It's hard to tell an AI this is bad. Okay. Uh, it's easier to train a person to say, these are bad actors, shouldn't be doing this. Okay. It's just like machine learning, I mean, a lot of companies have machine learning software that they profess is, good for cyber. And I'm not saying it's not, but, how do I tell AI that this URL is coming from a bad actor? Okay. Especially since, a cyber attack could come from anywhere. Okay. Yeah, how do I tell an AI? And I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just I think the AIs are in their infancy, artificial intelligence, and therefore, but if I'm a bad actor, in a country that is bounced off a server in South America that's still running, you know, Windows 7, you know, how do I explain that to an AI? That this is a bad actor versus a legitimate business transaction that's coming from a server that's just happens to be running Windows 7, and I'm making all that up. Don't take that for gospel. It's AI is only as smart as we teach it. Now, in 10, 15 years, will it be intuitive? I don't know. It can help a lot in certain aspects of cyber. Okay, every IT piece of equipment produces log files, recording of the transactions or the things that the machine is doing. Uh, for our defensive cyber operations personnel, DCO personnel, they review those logs for bad things, and they usually use scripting language like Python to develop tools to examine all these logs. But we still have to tell Python or even tell an AI what is bad. What are you looking for through millions of log files? Okay. And trying to ferry that out. Not to throw anybody under the bus, the SolarWinds incident a couple years ago when SolarWinds was hacked, they found out that SolarWinds, and I might be wrong, but that they had been infiltrated years before. They don't just get in and then attack immediately. They get into a system, you know, gain access, and then they wait to see if anybody figures it out. So they're waiting and lying in wait for 6 months, a year before they say, okay, no one's noticed anything, let's try this. They're very cautious until they, find a victim. So you have to, how do you tell an AI, that you got to watch for this? I'm not
Well,
saying it can't be done, but it's a very difficult thing. It's like trying to teach a computer morality. How do you teach a computer, whether it's machine learning or whether it's an AI, that this action is inherently bad and you shouldn't do it?
well, and I think that's interesting because when they do get into your system, the other thing that they're doing is they're collecting data, right? Or they're trying to slowly expand across all the rest of your servers. So when they do choose to attack, it becomes a so
Yeah,
much worse situation than it would have been originally.
agreed. Totally agree. And a individual that understands what's good and bad and what's right on your system, may be able to see something and go, that's not quite right, and investigates it, and such. But how do I teach an AI to do that? You know, that's, AI, there's a lot of them out there, you know. I see ads all the time, oh, I'll make you a master at all these different AIs in 1 month, and they got AIs for, creating images, AIs for, doing reports. And I mean, they're all over the place, you know, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's a natural extension of the evolving computer uh, infrastructure and everything, but it's still not there.
Gotcha. So focusing back on Eagle Global, for your own goals, where are you trying to get the company in the next 6 to 12 months?
We want to provide a service to potential customers. We want to make them more aware, so that's education, aware of the pitfalls, aware of, the fact that there is bad actors out there, and how could they, affect the business. All right. Ultimately, risk management, which is what really, Eagle Global Cybersecurity, we are a risk management company. We are going to try to reduce the risk to the business, which is what's important to the C-suite, is to reduce risk so they can make money. Simple, you know, reduce risk. But so that's where I want to see us going. That plus an education. I really think that educating people pays the biggest dividends at all, more than anything, you know. And, you can go back to the thing, I think it was Virgin Airlines, Branson, he was being criticized for training his people, and the phrase is, what if you train them and they leave? And he goes, well, what if I don't train them and they stay? Then what's that to my business? You know,
Yes.
so we try to convince management that you have to train, you have to expend the training budget. You can't, say that's the one you're going to cut when things get tight.
Well, and that's a great example too. That's actually a quote I use very frequently, except I actually didn't know it was from them. I just say COO and CFO. The CFO is focused on saving money, the COO is wanting to train the people. And so my question for you is, for the people that are listening to this show that are not in the C-suite, or they're in the C-suite but are not the final decision maker on big investments like this, how do you build either a cost benefit analysis or something to where you're able to explain the value that's created? Because it's not really an ROI. You're not
Oh,
generating
you,
more
you
money
are
with it,
correct.
but you've got to figure out a way. So
It's
what
hard
suggestions do
to,
you have for them?
it's hard to quantify an ROI on training because you're preventing things. How do you prove a zero or a negative? Well, you had no bad actors got into your system today. How do you prove that? You can't prove a negative uh, as much. So part of it is just identifying the fact that incursions happen. You point out, you educate the C-suite. You say, all right, look, here's an article that states a hospital got hit. Here's another one. Here's another one. And through the fact that in the industry, you can identify the results of not training, the results of not having a pen test. And you can say, you can prevent this. It's hard. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, but it's not. Uh, the hardest thing is to get in front of a CEO or get in front of a C-suite. Okay. Your employees know what needs to be fixed. If they would listen to their employees, it'd be a little bit easier. But because this expends money, with really no firm ROI, it's harder to convince the C-suite that it needs to expend the money on this. Now, if you can show them examples of the cost of a infiltration, somebody getting in, you brought up, BCIR, incident response, and if show them that what it costs to the business, sometimes that works. The C-suite listens to dollars, and although, a company like mine or any of them, it might be a little expensive, and I don't think it is, for training of the employees, the risk of not training them is much more. And you just have to, brief them and convince them of that. And part of it is by showing what happens to other companies. Don't be like, Sally Sue's company over here that didn't train her people, you know, and or be like this one over here, uh, and show them examples of it. One of the things we haven't talked about, the realm of cyber is like the medical profession. There are specialties all over. Okay, it's not just, oh, I'm a cyber guy, so therefore I have a CISSP, which is one of the worldwide cyber security certifications, or I am a certified chief information security officer, which I am. Uh, but there's more than that. Okay, we didn't talk about SCADA systems, which nobody knows anything about SCADA. Okay, which are the control systems inside manufacturing plants and other industries. Okay. SCADA systems control for a city would control traffic lights, would be part of a SCADA system. Okay. If you remember a few years ago, quite a few years ago, after Tampa Bay won their Super Bowl, there was a little city outside of Tampa Bay that somebody accessed and tried to adjust the treatment of water. Okay. The analysis of that afterwards was that they left a vendor uh, access facing, publicly facing software, they left it turned on. So the possibility of that happening, you explain to us, a municipality, you're in charge of taking care of this. Why wasn't this turned off? That was a lack of governance. You know, they point fingers. Well, nobody told me I had to go and turn this off. Because again, the governance wasn't there. And that's the other sad part about our business. We're afraid to identify our weaknesses out. It's very, very hard to get a company to admit that they failed at something because it erodes the confidence in the company. And that's the other side when you go to, I'm going to say, sell your services. Okay. Public perception is very, very important for any company. Okay. If you're a financial management company that gets hacked, how are you? I'm going to trust my money with them. So it's you can appeal to a C-suite's fear of losing confidence with the public, and then their stock go down. And again, I'm not a fear monger. In fact, I think that cyber people fall into the Chicken Little syndrome of the sky's falling every time, and it's not. So, but again, sometimes you have to use whatever works to convince somebody of the right actions to take.
It's really funny you mentioned Chicken Little because I literally just told, I'm pretty sure it was yesterday, I told someone that Chicken Little is a very negative chicken. Like
Yes.
that guy is very unhappy and the world is just always coming to an end.
The movie was funny, but the fairy tale is, yeah, you're right. And unfortunately in the cyber community, it's, they tend to, the sky's falling no matter what. And that's not true, not true at
Yeah,
all. Take it from a person that worked through Y2K when they said all the software in the world was going to stop working because it wasn't coded for the year flip from 1999 to 2000. I worked that night, okay, for a package delivery company to make sure that their packages were delivered. Software ran, you know. So you got to be careful of the sky's falling syndrome.
definitely. Do you have any final words for our audience before we sign off?
Uh, Take everything with a grain of salt. Okay. When you hear things, just take it with a grain of salt. And, like I said, the sky's not falling. Cyber is important to protect, just like the locks on the doors and the windows of your house. They're important. Okay. So pay attention to that, educate yourself, or find someone like Eagle Global Cybersecurity, and we'll help you with that. We won't do it for you. We'll help you do it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. This was an awesome conversation. I really thank you for your time, especially all the valuable insights and the slant of having a military background and how you can really drill that in further. So, to everyone listening, if you'd like to learn more about Eagle Cybersecurity, make sure you go to eaglecybersecurity.com. And from there, you can learn about their virtual CISO services, regulatory compliance, as well as their mentorship, like Mark has mentioned multiple times before, in regards to the training opportunities that are there. So, for everyone, thank you again for tuning in. And as always, stay curious and stay secure, and we'll chat soon. Mark, thank you again for all your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
It's been a pleasure. Hey there, it's Darren from The Digital Shift. I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the links in the description to learn even more information of everything we went over today. But if you enjoyed this podcast, then you are absolutely going to love this one. And if you're looking to look deeper into the technology that we go over in these videos, then go ahead and check out this one here. Regardless of which one you pick, you're going to walk away with something new. As always, I'll talk to you in the next one and keep being awesome.